Wasn't me.
Good morning. All right, we are talking this morning about BRRRRs.
Hey, wait. Just slow down. What happened to our cool music when we open up?
Oh, we missed the music. There was no dancing or
We
anything.
must be getting
like
old.
You know, we skipped last week when we were going live, so we just got out of practice. So Isaiah will work on that, get that music back online for next week, so we can jam out before the meeting starts. But this week, we are talking to our investors about BRRRRs. BRRRR. I think we had too many R's in our screensaver, but that's all right. It's Ohio and it is chilly here, and that's what we say every time.
It's 4 R's. How many were in our screensaver?
I don't know. There are 5 or 6. It just kept going on because here in Ohio, that's what we say every time we go outside. Brr.
That's what inside too. I'm wearing a vest. Come on.
No, yeah, it's chilly here. It looks nice outside, but when you walk out there, it's a little different. We've had a little different year this year as far as weather, but it's still cold here in Northeast Ohio.
What is a BRRRR? Why are we talking about weather on an investor channel?
Well, because people are coming from out of state, and some of these people live in tropical climates, and they don't realize when they buy a property here that the weather has a big impact on their investment. So you got to talk about the weather because otherwise they don't realize it. All right, so let me ask you a question, Cheech. Is what does the BRRRR stand for? What are we talking about?
BRRRR. It's buy.
You sound like a pirate.
I know. There is a day during this year that we talk like a pirate. I'm not sure what day that is. We'll have to figure that out. Hopefully it's on a Wednesday. But BRRRR stands for buying a property, rehabbing, that's the first R, rehabbing that property, renting that property out, refinancing that property to get your cash out to do it again, and then repeat. That's the last R in there.
Okay, so we get that call a lot, from investors wanting to do a BRRRR. And personally, I think we've been in environments where that was very, very achievable. But lately, it's been harder and harder to find those properties. Let's talk about why. I'll open up the forum to you guys. Why is it so hard to find those BRRRR properties right now?
Anybody?
No, interest rates certainly impacted the situation.
That's a big one. That's a big one. I mean, you think about it. Somebody could buy a property, put some money into it, rehab it, rent it out for whatever the going rent rates are, refinance it at a low interest rate. Rates were low. If you're refinancing it today, what are you refinancing at?
7.5.
Actually, today it was 7.625 for. That was for a purchase, and an investment may even be a little higher. Or I mean, a cash out may even be a little higher. So now you've got to still be able to cover that rent, or that rent's got to still be able to cover your house payment. And the question is, will it? And that's what a lot of investors are finding out. What was a great strategy to pick up properties may or may not be a great strategy, depending on where you're buying and how much work you've got to do to the property.
Well, and then you tack on top of that, not only are interest rates up, we have a shortage of inventory. So everybody that's looking to purchase one of these BRRRRs is competing with the general public, which they tend to buy on emotion.
Right.
They're not worried so much about does this property cash flow. They just want to have a place to live. So they tend to overspend on some of these homes. Actually, the word overspend isn't even fair because they're just doing what's necessary. And each time they spend over asking price, they're resetting the market. So these prices continue to go up. It's not that they're overpaying. They're just paying what's required.
And for a BRRRR in our area, that's good, actually. I mean, it's not good that you pay a lot of money for a property. However, those properties are holding their values here. There are places, we have investors. I mean, a good majority of our investors are West Coast, and they're buying in different areas, not just Cleveland. And in other areas, you've got a softening market, which means now all of a sudden you've spent 3-4 months getting that property ready to rent. Rents haven't gone up that much over that 3-4 months. and yet the property may or may not hold its value where you're at. Here, we are holding our value, so that's a positive for our market area to do a BRRRR.
Well, I think you're actually being a little bit generous on that time frame, even because when we're talking about 3 or 4 months of vacancy factor, I would lean to say it's even longer than that. To find a good contractor, you can find a contractor,
Yeah.
but to find a good contractor that can rehab one of these properties well, they're booked out. You know, I can go to some of my better contractors and say, hey, how quickly could you start something here? And we're talking, 4 or 5 months before they can even start the
Right.
job. Then you tack on, how long is it going to take to complete?
Right. Absolutely. So all these factors come into play, and something else. And we don't have somebody on here, a mortgage guy on here at the moment, but cash out refinances. How much can you pull out? Is it going to be enough? Banks have tightened up their lending standards a little bit. So if before they would have cashed out at 80, maybe now they're only cashing out at 70. Is that going to give you the cash you need to do what you need to do? Really, here's what it comes down to. You've got to, as an investor buying a property, what you always had to do is, what's the cost of that property? What's the cost of my repairs? What rent am I going to get on that property? Those are factors that you've always had to look at. And now you've got to say, on that refinance at these present rates and possibly higher rates, because we're still in the market to see higher rates. At these present rates or higher rates, am I going to cash flow? What about if somebody has a property now? They're already started this. They started this 4 months ago, Blaze. What are they going to do?
Well, I mean, obviously they're going to run into the challenge of, are they going to have the equity? Is the interest rate going to work out? What's the pricing going to be? Because it's hard even for a builder or a contractor to price out a job because of the change in the prices of the goods, the lumber prices, for instance. They're always fluctuating, and it's hard for them to price out that job.
So what happens if they find themselves in the hole? What are their choices?
They could sell the property. They could rent the property as is, maybe for a lesser price. I mean, you don't have to panic and sell a property, but ultimately you've got to look at it from the perspective of, what can I do to minimize my losses? And that property sitting there vacant is never a good idea.
Right. I mean, look at your options. Your options could be, maybe you can still rent it out and break even right now. Rents are going to continue to go up over the years, and rates are going to eventually come down, and you can refinance. So maybe you can rent it out now and do that. Maybe you just buy and hold and don't refinance, so you have your earlier rate, and you just don't take the cash out, and then you hang on to it and have some cash flow. Maybe you flip it and make enough profit from that sale to make it worth your while. That's always a good possibility. Now you're getting 100% of value of whatever it's valued at, instead of 70 or 75% of value. What about short-term rentals? Look at short-term rentals as a possibility to increase that cash flow. Depending on where the property is, type of property, that's an option too. So you have to look at your options, but I would just want to say that if you're thinking about doing a BRRRR, you have, and here's the thing, people hear what a great move this is, because we get calls for it all the time. We do. And they have to look at what is the downside to it, because there is, especially in this market, a downside to doing BRRRRs if you're not careful. And that's why they need to hook up with people like us, people that are experienced in this.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at, you see on all of these different investment YouTube pages, because let's face it, we got the internet. We can jump on the internet and find all kind of get rich quick schemes, and BRRRRs and flips right now are kind of one of those things that's very difficult to pull off, and unless you're very, very experienced in this industry. To find a long-term hold, that's a little different, to purchase something that's going to cash flow in that direction. But to find something that's going to require a bunch of work that you can rinse and repeat, like the BRRRR strategy suggests, the stars and the moons aren't aligning up for something like that. So what I'd encourage people to do is change strategies. There is going to become a market at some point in the future. I can't tell you if that's a year from now or 20 years from now, where BRRRRs and flips are going to be popular again. But what I can tell you is when BRRRRs and flips were really, really profitable, I was struggling to find any investors that were willing to put their money into them. I mean, you were finding investment properties in Cleveland. You could buy a duplex for $7,000 back in 2010, 2011.
Right.
But it was crickets. It was radio silence when I was trying to reach out to people saying these are great deals, because the market wasn't speaking the truth of, hey, this is a great time to buy. Everybody was operating off of fear. Right now, we're operating off of, we got all this extra equity, the market is good, inflation is, starting to, drag the market down. But ultimately, everything is pretty good as far as the general state of the union when we're talking about money for people, especially in some of these other states where they have a lot of extra equity in their house and they can pull that out and invest it in Ohio, where here in Ohio, when we talk about a $300,000 house, that's a pretty nice house here. But if you go to California or go to Idaho, for instance, Idaho is really blown up. A $300,000 house there, I mean, it's like, it's a porta potty is what it is here, what we would compare it to here. So the pricing and the affordability is relative. It all comes down to where you live, what you make, and how affordable it is. Unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, here in Ohio, we do attract a lot of out-of-state buyers, but what we want to do is reset their expectations. Going the BRRRR route or the flip route, it's very difficult. I get those off-market properties and stuff that are out there. And I was looking at one yesterday, and I think it was $115,000 duplex down in Lodi, Ohio. And it just was, I flipped through, there was mold on the walls, there was asbestos in the base. I could tell from the pictures it was trashed. And when I compared it to a duplex that was just right up the road, I actually made a video for this duplex that I think is a good deal yesterday. I compared the two. When I factored in the time and the money that it was going to take and the vacancy factor on that property that would be buying as a wholesale deal or a great deal, that because you tag the word wholesale on anything, people think, oh, this is like rock bottom. Is the big yellow clearance going out of business sign is on the building and let's spend. But ultimately, when you would factor in the vacancy factor, the amount of work it would take, the time it would take, it paled in comparison to the one that was up the road, ready to go.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, why did people do BRRRRs in the first place? It was because they could repeat it. They could throw their cash in. They could take all their cash, buy this property, because a lot of them had to be bought with cash, put their money to fix it up, refinance, get their cash back, and keep doing this down the line. Now, that may not be the ideal way to go now, but they could take part of their cash, use it as a down payment, finance the house, buy a house now that's already cash flowing, buy it, and then take a little bit more of their money and put it into another house. So they can still own multiple houses instead of doing it the way they were doing it through the BRRRR route.
Right. I hate to be that bearer of bad news. And anytime you're making a video for the internet, you don't want to be talking about why you can't do something. But ultimately, we get so many of these calls about BRRRRs and flips. They're just not out there the way they used to be, and they're few and far between. So if you simply change strategies, there's plenty of deals out there.
And we're not saying that there isn't a BRRRR out there. We're just saying you need to look at what could happen and make sure you're not going to be stuck with a property that you can't sell for what you have in it, and you can't rent for what you're paying for.
Yeah, I ran numbers on a property up in Lorain the other day, and it was I think I made a video for it too. It was an $81,000 duplex, and you could tell all the drywall, everything in it was brand new. What happened is somebody bought it to try to attempt a BRRRR. They started going through it. It was taking too long. They did a bunch of work to it, but ultimately they ran out of time and funds to finish it where it was going to be profitable. And they've relisted that same property that's probably 80% complete back online. And now what's hard is now for somebody to buy that property, they have to pretty much be cash because they're missing plumbing, they're missing bathrooms, and they're probably not going to get even their asking price for that property. So a well-intentioned investor was following the strategies that are mentioned, in many different places about BRRRRs and flips, but this market sent them in a different direction.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest challenges of the BRRRR right now is definitely the second R, the rehab expense and how long it's going to take to get it done. And you know, it throws a variable into the mix that's difficult to, you know, we don't have crystal balls.
Yeah, it's a lot easier if you have your own crew. If you're
Right.
here, boots on the ground, and you have your own crew,
Mhm.
than it is if you're cross country trying to get a contractor to do the work for you.
Right.
The other thing too is the Fannie Mae requirements. The seasoning period is starting next month is going from 6 months to 12 months. So you're going to have to hold the property longer before you can refinance it.
Is that though? Usually in the seasoning, though, they'll take into consideration work that's been performed on the property. In other words, if I bought a property today for $100,000 and chose to sell it 3 months now for $150,000, they're not going to finance it. But if I bought a property for $100,000 and I threw $60,000 into it, and because of that 60 I threw into it, it's worth $200, they would finance it. So that's something you want to check out. I don't know, but that's normally how financing will go when it comes to seasoning.
Well, what I've run into in the past is trying to get a loan for a property that was originally financed a certain way, and you're wanting to use that same financing. That seasoning requirement can actually prohibit you from getting it within a certain time frame if they did the work too quick. Now, that's not a problem nowadays, you know, where the work is done too quick because it's so hard to find contractors. But I get where you're coming from, Sean. That seasoning issue can affect a future buyer. Other than that, I mean, that's that. I think we've talked about all the different topics that you run into when you're looking for. We put BRRRR on the title, but it also applies to flips. It's very difficult to find flips in this environment that are truly profitable once you factor in all the other stuff. Now, if you're not putting vacancy factor, or you're not putting, you know, the time frame it's going to take to do it, or even possibly the increases in prices of material, you may run the numbers and it looks right. But we're here to tell you, we go a little bit deeper in our deep dive, and we can point out why these are so challenging.
You know, and I've said this over and over, and let me just say it one more time here with everybody, is one of the best moves you can do is, let's say you find a duplex, both sides are rented presently. The house is okay, but it could definitely use updating throughout: paint, flooring, cabinets, whatever.
Cosmetic repairs.
Yeah. And you get in there and you're cash flowing as it is. As leases come up, you're raising rents and you're cash flowing more. And eventually you're going to say, hey, listen, next time I'm raising your rent to this. And that one tenant's going to say, you know what, I'm moving. That's fine. Okay, 3 months from now, that tenant's moving. That gives you time to line up somebody to get in there when that tenant's out and paint it, floor it, clean it up. And now you're renting it for a much higher amount. And when it happens to the tenant on the other side, you do the same thing. So you've ultimately made that property worth a lot more because of cash flow alone, much less the cosmetic increase, that down the line you can refinance, or down the line you can sell it for a profit. But in the meantime, you've cash flowed and made money.
Yeah, I have a friend that bought a duplex here in Medina through me, and they did just that. They waited about a year. One of the tenants moved out. They went in and they spent, you know, probably $10,000, $12,000 on flooring, paint, just making the place look crisp. And that rental income on that one unit, this was a ranch, let's say 1,000 square foot unit, went from $700 a month to $1,250 a month by simply taking and doing those repairs. So that's where
almost double.
Make a difference.
Almost double.
Yeah. And by using that strategy, they didn't have that huge vacancy factor because they were able to plan for when that all happened.
And that's really your smartest move if you're looking to buy and hold, which a BRRRR is ultimately a buy and hold.
Sure. That refinance piece just becomes a little more difficult down the road with interest rates the way that they are, because you're thinking, oh, do I want to pull the cash out of this at this interest rate, because you have to factor that into your future numbers on the next property.
Right.
All right. Anybody else got anything they want to throw in there? All right. If not, we're right at 20 minutes. That's a perfect time to end this video. I appreciate you all. We'll do it again next week.
All right. Have a good day.